Okay. Good. So please make sure that your audio is on mute until we open up for conversation. What else did I want to say real quick? Okay, so just as a quick introduction, back in the spring, PDP and Leah Stein Dance Company were hosting a dance community action Zoom meeting to compose a letter to the mayor and city council to try to get them to not zero out the cultural fund. And all the participants were adding their comments and, you know, what they thought might go in the letter. And Lynn put in the chat box a little tidbit about, you know, Philadelphia being the center of the beginning of dance, theater dance here in the US. And so we didn't end up in the letter, but I said to her, that's great. Let's figure out how we can talk about your research. And so this is the result of that, that exchange. And it's a great opportunity to you know, PDP's done some projects on local dance history in the last half of the 20th century. So this is a great opportunity to look back in a time that I really know very little or nothing. Just want to give a little bit of Dr. Brooks's biography. She's an author and Catherine Shadek, Humanities Professor Emerita at Franklin and Marshall College, where she founded the dance program in 1984. So she's been leading it for over 34 years. She's a recipient of the Bradley R. Dewey Award for Outstanding Scholarship and the Christian and Mary Lindback Award for Teaching. Brooks has presented her work at conferences and symposia in the US, Canada, and Europe, and she's authored books and scholarly articles and served as a performance reviewer for Dance Magazine, as editor of Dance Research Journal and Dance Chronicle, and until very recently, she was writer and editor for the Philadelphia's Thinking Dance online journal. There's more information on our website, so you can go there and like to know more. So I'm very pleased for us all to have this opportunity to hear from you, Lynn, and to hear about your research. And I'm now turn everything over to you. And thank you, everyone, for having this conversation with us.
I'm going to just start by sharing my screen, and then I will hope that you can see my slides. Yes? Are you all seeing the double image? Okay, now it should be working. Can you all see the slides? Yes? Yes. Okay. So I want to thank Terry and the Philadelphia Dance Projects very much for inviting me for this opportunity to share my work, about which I'm very excited, my dance history research. I've been doing it for many, many years, but it never ceases being exciting for me. And I'm going to be talking about my journey and my experiences as a dance historian. And with my current project, I hope these will provide some insight about Philadelphia today, its dance and its broader cultural history, which is particularly relevant to today. So I think you'll pick that up as I talk. I had started my research in my Philadelphia phase. I had done earlier research in Spain and in the Netherlands. I started my Philadelphia phase at the encouragement of my great teacher, Genevieve Oswald, my great mentor. She said to me, Lynn, you have to do this. You have to do this. And I thought, well, how could this be as exciting as Spain or the Netherlands? But it has been, and it's occupied me for decades. So I want to acknowledge Gigi Oswald, and some of you may know that name because Gigi was the founding curator of the Dance Research Collection. That's now the Jerome Robbins Dance Research Collection at New York Public Library. And Gigi's daughter, Anne, is actually on this call, Anne Johnston, so that's wonderful. So I started doing research on Philadelphia dance history, and at Gigi's direction, I started looking into John Durang. And this is the book that resulted from that research. He was born in 1768 and he died in 1822, having essentially retired at by 1820. And he was the first professional theater dancer who was born on what is now US soil. So it was very, very exciting to do research into his life and work. But I didn't want to end there, and that's where my current research arises. But let's just pause for a moment and look back at the city that John Durang would have known in his younger days, the East Prospect of the city of Philadelphia. So this is what the Port of Philadelphia used to look like. This is what John Durang, more or less, would have been seeing when he was a young man wandering the docks and wharves of Philadelphia. This was his world. In addition to the theaters in which he danced. And we're going to see one of those right here. This is another set of views that John Durang himself would have been seeing. And you probably recognize a lot of these. And that's wonderful that we still have in Philadelphia these buildings like the State House and the bank and the hospital. But in the center, and I placed it in the center, is the Chestnut Street Theater, which no longer exists, but back in John Durang's day, it was the most elegant, high-class theater in the United States, certainly in Philadelphia. It was based on English models, and very high-level architects contributed to it, and it was a fine theater. Philadelphia was the second city of the British Empire at this time, so it deserved a fine theater. And John Durang danced on the stage of the Chestnut Street Theater for many, many years, as did most of his family members. He had 6 children. I knew that the dance history of Philadelphia didn't cease with John Durang's demise. And by the way, he was actually born in Lancaster, my hometown, sort of a fluke that his mother, mother and father came over from the French Alsace. His mother had a sister married and settled in Lancaster, as he put it, and she crossed the ocean pregnant and came to be with her sister for the birth of her first child. The family then went to York, and when he was a young teenager, moved to Philadelphia, which is where he spent the rest of his professional career, aside from his touring. And he had a house at 4th and was then Cedar Street, now South. He owned his own home and land. He was very proud of that. John Durang, as I said, retired from the stage at 1820 and was gone by 1822, was deceased. But I knew that the history of Philadelphia's dance involvement continued well beyond him. And these 3 images here represent the 3 best known Philadelphia dancers of that period. If any are known and remembered at all, these are the 3. Who are La Petite Augusta Maywood, Mary Ann Lee. They actually made their debut simultaneously in 1837 on the same stage, and at the Chestnut Street Theater, and George Washington Smith, who came onto the scene in the 1840s more visibly. So these 3 I knew were kind of names and had made exciting contributions. And I wanted to tell the story of Philadelphia as the early ballet capital of the United States, which it was. I knew that it was before New York became a cultural and theatrical center. Philadelphia was the heart of the theatrical and dance life in the nation. And it continued to be that even once New York surpassed it in cultural weight, which happened in the course of the antebellum period, pre-Civil War. So this was my goal. This is the research I was going to do. I was going to document and tell everybody about how important Philadelphia was as a capital of ballet. So I started doing my research in the archives, and I went to the Library Company of Philadelphia. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. It's just a delicious place to enter and to work in if you're a historian, and I certainly hope you'll have an opportunity to do that. They also have very, very nice exhibits and some very interesting talks when it's open. and it will be again soon, I'm sure. So I was in the print room of the library company, and they knew I had made my appointment in advance, and I said, this is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at theatrical dance, and social dance would interest me too, between 1820 and 1860. What have you got? I went up to the print room, and they had pulled everything out, and I'm expecting to see ballerinas and little, pointy toes on tree branches, which is how ballerinas were depicted in those days, and so on. But that is not what I saw. This is what I saw primarily. These are examples of the prints. Many of the prints were like this that they had pulled for me. I was sitting with a research assistant, a student of mine, Emily Hawk, who I'm still very close with. She's doing graduate work herself at Columbia now. And these images came before us, and I'll never forget Emily's face as we started looking at them and reading the text bubbles. And I remember thinking to myself, this is not what I'm interested in. I'm not looking at minstrelsy. I had seen playbills that advertised blackface minstrelsy, and I wasn't going to look at that. But so much of the iconography was this material that I realized sitting there, maybe I have to look at this. So I'm going to back up for a moment. I'll be coming back to these kinds of images, and I'm going to tell you what the goals of this talk are. So I want to reveal a little bit about my own experience as a dance historian, my own questions and path, which I've begun to discuss. I want to uplift Philadelphia dance history to its rightful place of importance, dating back centuries now. John Durang started performing in the 18th century on Philadelphia stages. And I want to identify some major sites for further dance history research and share some findings from these repositories that have influenced my current research. So those are my goals for this talk. I'm not telling you the story of my current research. I'm not revealing it to you in this short talk. That I can do it in other circumstances. So why Philadelphia? When I spoke with the editor at a major press and I told him about the project I was doing a number of years ago when I first started it, he said, very interesting, but why Philadelphia? I bet we've all heard that kind of question before. So let me just explain to you a little bit about why Philadelphia really is an important place to look at in this period. We looked closely earlier at some images of Philadelphia from John Durang's day, the port and some of the important buildings. Now let's back up and look at it geographically, kind of geopolitically. So you see where Philadelphia is located in this Mason-Dixon line map from 1767. And you see the Mason-Dixon line, which is going to become a very, very important political boundary over time. And you see that Philadelphia is an important port, and it's also the southernmost major city in the then United States above the Mason-Dixon line. And when we come over to this other map, and I just have to move something on my screen so I can see it myself, you see again that line remains critical for determining slave and free states. That line was going to extend west. Above that line, more or less, were the free states, and below that line, slave states. And that was in 1820 at the Missouri Compromise. And of course, by 1861, we're in a civil war, and those boundaries are still very significant and very visible. So Philadelphia is the first northern city in the free state territory. And that is very important for Philadelphia's history. And it's going to be important for its not just its political history, but its cultural history. And whoops, I went forward a bit too much. So I know we're all very familiar with some important statesmen of Philadelphia, people like Benjamin Franklin. But I want to point out that there were some other very important figures in this period in Philadelphia history. Again, they're important for the history that I'm going to be discussing. Pennsylvania was a major site of abolitionist activity. It had one of the largest and wealthiest free Black populations. And I don't mean to say that every free Black was wealthy by any means. It was a very thin slice of wealthy individuals, but they were educated, they were politically vocal, some of them had quite a store of resources. They were socially very, very tight. And Philadelphia had an important African-American culture evolving in part in connection with the white abolitionist movement as well. And here you see some of the important figures. Benjamin Rush, politically important, scientifically important. He was a doctor and professor at Penn, and a leading abolitionist of the time. Of course, these days we would question his racial views, but back in the day he was quite liberal. Anthony Benezet, who preceded Rush as a leader of the white abolitionist movement, a very important educator, established the first free Black school in Philadelphia. And then we have three important Black leaders. Absalom Jones, who founded the first, one of the very first African churches in the United States, along with Richard Allen, who also formed an important church, African church. And Absalom Jones formed St. Thomas. He was the leader of St. Thomas Episcopal Church, and Richard Allen of Bethel AME Church, which still stands at the site where it was founded, though the building is different from the building in which Richard Allen preached. James Forten is an important example of a businessman, very outspoken, highly educated, Revolutionary War hero, leader of the African-American community in this period. So this is part of the cultural backdrop to Philadelphia that I have uncovered for myself. Certainly many others have known about it, as significant to the culture of Philadelphia theatrically. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as I move along. Here are images of some of the institutions with which those individuals were connected. The Pennsylvania Abolition Society, which was all white. The seal of that society is represented in the upper left on the screen. And the two churches that I mentioned earlier, the African Episcopal Church of St. Thomas and what is now Mother Bethel, then Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. And there's a beautiful statue of Richard Allen right at the corner of 6th and Lombard. It's very, very moving. I get tears in my eyes whenever I see it, so go visit. You can tour the church as well, which is very moving. In case you think that only men were involved in the important political and cultural developments, I'll just tell you that this is not true. Women made their way in. They weren't particularly wanted. The abolitionist societies, even when they became interracial, were still men only. Women founded their own societies, the Pennsylvania Female Anti-Slavery Society, which was founded as an interracial, all-female organization. And you see here two of the women who were founders, Lucretia Mott, Quaker, and Harriet Forten Purvis, who was the daughter of James Forten, whom we saw on the previous page. And this is the seal of the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society, also designed by a Philadelphia Quaker woman. Sorry, this is not turning as I wished. Okay, so I'm heading back into my research and archive land after explaining some of that background to you, which I dug into after my print room encounter at the library company. And I realized I had a whole lot of different questions and ideas and words and images running around my head that I had to figure out how to put together. And some of these words came up later. Words like science and phrenology and ethnology, they came in a little bit later. But this is the kind of material that I've been trying to weave together in my research since that moment of that light bulb moment in the library company. So I'm going to talk about some of the resources that I have used in all of my research, and these are particularly materials that I've drawn on for this research that I'm currently developing and coalescing into organized statements. So these are the sources from which I'm drawing that organization. These are some examples of prints that are critical to the kind of research I'm doing. And I chose prints that exemplify the two different kinds of dances that I've been juxtaposing in my research. For a while, I was calling this research the Black and the Blanc on antebellum Philadelphia stages. Some of you know that Romantic ballet used to be called Ballet Blanc. So that's where the Black and the Blanc, the white and the black come in. And here we see T.D. Jim Crow Rice in his blackface act of Jim Crow on one side. And on the other side, we see the Ravel family of acrobat and ballet dancers who were very critical in early America in introducing many European techniques and works to the United States stage. They were acrobats and ballet dancers. They did both. And here they're doing both on the rope, which is quite impressive. So these are examples of some of the kinds of prints that give me an idea of what kind of movements people were doing, what they were wearing, what people who depicted them wanted to highlight. You know, the little tiny pointy feet, for example, of the ballet dancers, the nicely turned out leg on that tightrope, as opposed to the raggedy, shapeless clothing of T.D. Rice, and the different ways that he's using his upper body and his focus, for example. Here's some other sources that are critical to my work, and these are playbills. These playbills, if you can see the little white text over here, were collected at the Free Library of Philadelphia, which has an outstanding theater collection. So I hope you have an opportunity to go there. You have to make an appointment. Don't just drop in. Again, here I have examples of the two different kinds of theatrical representations that dominated dance on the theatrical stages between 1820 and 1860. On the left, we have a French ballerina, she is Mademoiselle Celeste. She soon got married and became Madame Celeste. And she's doing a number of melodramas here. The Wizard's Skiff was one of her most famous melodramas, and the ballet La Bayadère, which is not the Bayadère that is done or hardly done anymore because it's considered offensive, but it's not Petitpas Bayadère, it's a preceding one. Over on the other side, we have Ethiopian minstrelsy, as it was often called, blackface minstrelsy, and we have two playbills together here. And I just want to point out, I think it's not, no, it's not here. But, oh, it is here. It's just because these images are covering it. I wanted to show you that here is a spoof by this blackface minstrel troupe, Palmo's Ethiopian Opera, by I Dare, or The Revolt of the Woolheads. This gives you an example of the kinds of material that was performed on these stages in this time. So, as I said, it's not always easy to look at this stuff. I can't tell you how many playbills I've looked at, and I've made a huge database of the material that I've pulled from them. Some of those playbills appear in newspapers in a condensed form, not the big poster form that I was showing you just now. But newspapers, that's in the amusement section where they would be listing what all the different theaters are showing. But there were also newspapers in this period that were dedicated to cultural commentary, like the Dramatic Mirror. And when you go through these, you find a lot of interesting references to the dancing of the time and understanding how people were seeing and evaluating the dancing of this period. Both blackface, primarily ballet and balletic types of dancing, but also blackface comes up sometimes in these newspapers. And here's a newspaper, Sanford's Opera House, This was primarily a blackface minstrelsy house, Sanford's. Sam Sanford was himself a famous blackface minstrel, and he often did what were called wench roles. He dressed in female travesty and acted the part of a black female. Anyway, he opened his own opera house in Philadelphia, primarily featuring Ethiopian, as they were called, blackface acts. And he published his own newspaper to publicize his own tastes in theater. So that's another interesting take on newspapers of the time. Another resource, sheet music. So sheet music is valuable for a number of reasons for me. Much of the sheet music has very interesting covers. And the covers illustrate acts that were popular, that were done on United States stages. So sometimes it's music that was never performed on these stages and would feature somebody like Marie Taglioni, who never came to the United States, but she might be depicted on the cover of the sheet music. However, in this case, these are both artists who did come to the United States. Fanny Elsler, over here, this is a booklet in which there are several of her famous dances, including her cachucha, her most famous dance in the world. And here's the music to it. And over on the other side here, we have Billy Whitlock, who was an American blackface minstrel, known for his dancing. And here we see him dancing on a stage. And we see the music to one of his songs, Who's That Knockin' at the Door? And it was a song, so this actually has lyrics. And the lyrics are very enlightening. Some of the lyrics actually even refer to dancing and talk about steps and movements and actions, in addition to other information, cultural information that they carry. There are a number of very wonderful sheet music collections available. Some of them are online. Other work that I've looked at extensively, one on the left, the Dumont Minstrelsy Collection, is at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, right next door to the Library Company. The Kecker Diary is at the Library Company. So here we're getting into the handwritten sources. In my earlier research on Spain and the Netherlands, everything was handwritten. So this is this is easy handwriting for me at this point. So the Dumont Minstrelsy Collection was created by a late 19th century into the 20th century blackface minstrel of Philadelphia, Frank Dumont. And he wrote in his collection a handwritten history of minstrelsy with images of the blackface performers he worked with and his dates and whatever information he could remember. So here's an example of a page from that, that collection. And the Kecker Diary is of interest for different reasons. He was a sort of upper middle class Philadelphian, or middle to upper middle class dentist, actually. And in his diary, he records his activities that are important to him. And I'm not going to explain what all of them are, but he does talk about going to theater, going to dancing lessons, going to balls. So this gives us an idea of how somebody in his class in Philadelphia would have spent his free time. Letters, again, we're in the handwriting side of the research. Letters are important for quite a number of reasons. For one thing, you get to see the handwriting of people whose dancing you might be exploring. Over here on the left is a letter by Madame Celeste, a handwritten letter that she wrote to a theater manager who was trying to engage her for performances. And on the right, we have a manager, Francis Wemyss, who was a manager of at different times the Chestnut and the Walnut Street Theater, which, as you know, is still standing and still presenting theater. Well, not at this very moment, but it will be, God willing, soon again. Francis Wemyss, as a theater manager, writing to the son of John Durang, Charles Durang, John's eldest son, who became a very important ballet master, dance teacher, actor, theater prompter, which is the word kind of for director back in these days, a very important figure in Philadelphia theater. So here is a letter from manager Wemyss to Charles Durang, who was then a prompter at Wemyss's theater. Other important kinds of documents, accounts, and other regulatory documents. And here are just a couple of examples. Henry Whale. Henry Whale began as a child performer on Philadelphia stages. He was known as Master Whale. And then he became an important dancing master in the city, and he published some dance treatises. He also kept accounts of all of the students whom he taught in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. He went out to Princeton and he taught there as well. So we can get a nice picture of what a prosperous dancing master what his life might be like in Philadelphia. Looking at Whale's account book. And over on the right, we have accounts that refer to the repairs made to the City Dancing Assembly, the building where they were holding their elegant elite balls by invitation only, and with very careful management and dress codes and all kinds of limitations. It was definitely for only certain kinds of people. I mentioned dance treatises. I mentioned that Whale wrote a dance treatise, Henry Whale. Well, so did our Charles Durang. He wrote, in fact, I think it's 5 dance treatises, although it turns out that he cribbed sections of one treatise to put into another. So it's sort of one continuous long dance treatise, if you really analyze it. So these you can find online, although I've actually held the books in my hand at different repositories. This is one of his works, The Fashionable Dancer's Casket from 1856. And this is a work that interests me, his choreography for a Spanish dance. What would have made this Spanish? This was a social dance for elegant ballroom performance. What else do we use? Well, in reconstructing the dances of the past, travelers' accounts are very, very useful. They reveal in part the traveler's own prejudices and interests, of course, but they also reveal a lot of description about the people in the place and sometimes the movement. So this is Charles Dickens' American Notes for General Circulation. He was in the United States in the early 1840s and wrote this fascinating work, which was published in 2 volumes in both the United States and London. And he did phenomenal description of one of the most important dancers of this period, Juba, Henry Lane. And Juba, unfortunately, he never danced in Philadelphia. He's the only actual African-American who performed with a blackface minstrel troupe. Unfortunately, never in Philadelphia. But his dancing was the admiration of everyone's, and every white minstrel tried to imitate and best Juba. So it's an important work for that reason. And the description, the dance description by Dickens is just breathtaking. Before I talk about these archives, I just want to mention that there are a few other kinds of sources that might be important for different kinds of work. Fictional accounts, for example, like Jane Austen's books where she talks about dancing. Don't miss them. She knew dancing. It really matters what she has to say. If I were doing the history of ballet dancing, and friends of mine have done that, there are other sources I would want to look at. I mean, a ballet technique, like shoes. I'd want to go to a shoe museum and look at the shoes that people were wearing on the streets and the shoes that dancers were dancing in, and ballet historians have done that. Theater programs, at the point when they are issued, become an important source. In this time, they were very, very rare. You had to buy them. Often the libretto to a major work would be sold separately. And the libretti actually, of course, are important. And I would encourage you to, or scenarios when they're published, take a look at those. And they were sort of published in condensed form sometimes in the playbill that was posted on the street. So you can find them in that sense. So there are all kinds of interesting other sources that I haven't shown you. Genealogies. I did a lot of genealogical work with the John Durang research, for example. They can be very important depending on your topic. So here we are at the archives. These are the archives where I've done most of my work. The Library Company I've mentioned already, Library Company of Philadelphia. The Historical Society of Pennsylvania, also right next door. I had a fellowship where I sort of split my time between the two places. Both of them have exhibits of their historical documents and talks. When they're properly open, don't miss visiting them. The Free Library of Philadelphia also has wonderful exhibits and talks. The theater collection is all the way at the top of the building in the rare books section, which don't avoid walking through there. Make a point of getting there when you can, because the rare books collection is breathtaking at the Free Library at Logan Square, and you walk through it to get to the theater collection, and you have to buzz your way in and all kinds of things, so you have to make an appointment. Over here, the windows and people sitting at their desks that you see on the right side of the screen, that's the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania. In the main library there, again, make an appointment to go there. Make sure they know that what you're after and that they can accommodate you. Very rich and wonderful collections and fabulously knowledgeable archivists. I would say that about all of these collections. Talk to the archivists, the librarians. They know what's there. You can't always tell from looking at the catalog. Start with the catalog, but don't end with the catalog. Talk to the archivist. The Charles R. Blockson Afro-American collection at Temple University, very rich collection for, depending on your topic, can be very, very rich in resources. For you, very gracious and charming librarians there who will do everything they can to assist you. The Rosenbach Museum and Library, again, you need an appointment to go there. Even if you go into the museum, you will not have access to the library unless you have an appointment. Nor does an appointment at the library give you access to the museum, I discovered. That's a separate admission. So the Rosenbach has wonderful resources. Again, look at their online offerings, but try to get in touch with the librarian to find out what's there if you have specific questions. So these are the places I've done my work in Philadelphia. There are other important collections. American Philosophical Society, for example, is a very important collection. It doesn't happen to have anything particularly relevant for me, but it might for another a research question. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the surprises that might occur to you as you listen to me, that they certainly occurred to me, just how rich Philadelphia was in producing stage dance and dancers in the period. So I have images here. Some of these you've seen before. Some of these names will be familiar to you in the images. I just want to point out that Joseph Smith is George Washington Smith's son, who became a well-known Harlequin dancer. But there are a whole bunch of other dancers. We don't have images of most of them. They weren't important enough to get lithographed, but they were very important in the day to keeping American dancers prominent on the stages. And most of the American ballet dancers of the time came from Philadelphia. And here's just a list of them. And if you want to just cast your eyeball over that list, impressive. And that's just some of them that I could fit on the page. Some more surprises. How simultaneous the emergence was of blackface minstrelsy and romantic ballet in the United States. Why this is the case and which classes they appeal to is part of my bigger research question. But for example, 1832 was when T.D. Rice debuted his Jim Crow act. He continued to perform for decades, and he developed that act into full-scale operas. He called them operas, Ethiopian operas. And same year, 1832, Marie Taglioni debuts in La Sylphide, which by some criteria is the full-on start of the Romantic Ballet. 1841, the debut of Giselle, one of the absolute landmark works of Romantic Ballet. A year later, 1842, the first formal minstrel troupe, not solo blackface act like T.D. Rice, but formal minstrel troupe, was organized in 1842. Giselle wasn't performed in the United States for a couple more years, but it was performed, and American dancers like Marianne Lee danced the lead role. Over here on the right side, we have Sanford's Ethiopian Opera House opening in 1853. And in 1857, it was already in the planning phases. Earlier, for a number of years, the American Academy of Music, our beloved Academy of Music, in which we still can see opera and ballet, or will, when it reopens. Within just a few years, these two very different kinds of opera houses opened. Another surprise might be that these were not just mindless entertainment forms, but that they really grappled with issues that were plaguing the United States at this time. And they were grappling with these issues by means of the body. And if you think about the fact that these very issues were dependent on the bodies of human beings, you realize how dance becomes a central means of working out these debates. And among these are struggles over slavery and rights for African descended people. Slavery, of course, for those who were enslaved. Rights for those who were free. The women's rights movement was just picking up speed. And it was the abolitionist movement in Philadelphia that gave a big push to that movement. And many of the women involved in the Philadelphia abolitionist movement became prominent in the suffragist or women's rights movement. And also, this is a period when scientific views of the human body and human hierarchy really shaped the understanding of the population. In my view, this is in the United States when science definitively slapped down religion as the shaping view of cosmology. And this was critical for the understanding of the politics and culture of the time. I'm going to talk just a little bit about these points. Women were very, very much affected by the culture of respectability. In the day, their roles were very constrained, the way they could appear in public, the kinds of clothing they could wear, how they had to behave. Any woman who was going to be considered respectable had to follow a very stringent set of rules. And here you see some of the images that represent these. The Friedler family parlor. This is the image of the respectable family with all the signals, piano and drapery and a little dog playing with the kid on the floor. And the mother very properly dressed with the husband protecting her behind her. These very proper young ladies sitting around a table embroidering. And Black high society followed along with these same strictures. This is a very important work for my research, sketches of the higher classes of colored society in Philadelphia by a Black author, Joseph Wilson. Very informative work. Also adhered to these same cultural strictures, particularly for all people, but women were most constrained by them. If we look at theatrical women in this period, these are all performances that happened in Philadelphia, we see a very different kind of woman showing off her body, addressing audiences, being expressive, carrying weapons. They were theatrical weapons, they were props, but there they were, showing their legs and body, flirting. This is a woman in travesty flirting with another woman. These happen to be sisters, but very exciting for the time. And up here on the right, you see the bloomer or reform dress, Amelia Bloomer's dress reform, which looks an awful lot like a romantic tutu to me, and actually became a costume that was used on the stage, both seriously and in satire. We also have abolitionists ascending the stage, the political stage, including women like Lucretia Mott. And the abolitionists had so much difficulty renting halls where they could meet that they built their own in 1838, Pennsylvania Hall, right near the State House, Independence Hall. It was open for 3 days before it was burned down by violent mobs. The police, the fire companies, it's been questioned, were they passively looking on? Were they prevented from acting? In any case, the place was burned in 3 days. Women taking to stage as political as well as theatrical. And over on the right, you see that a few years later, the nativist riots against the Irish and against Catholics were rampant in Philadelphia. Again, they were murderous riots. Many Catholic churches were destroyed and burned. Interestingly, the Irish became very, very active, almost dominant in blackface minstrelsy. And there's some research onto why this was the case. It's a very interesting story. The issue of slavery, of course, is going to show up in blackface minstrelsy. And we see the very, very typical format represented here in this imagery of the minstrel troupe show as it evolved in the latter part of the antebellum period toward the Civil War period. On the one hand, you would have the Southern plantation slaves, happy, singing, dancing. They had so much fun as the blackface minstrels depicted them, often associated with nature, with animals. And over on the right, we see the depictions of the Northern dandy. These were the free Northern blacks who aspired to showy upper class behavior and were viciously mocked by cartoonists and blackface minstrels. And here you see some of the depictions from minstrel illustrations of these are white men in blackface. Probably this female figure was also a man, and this one over here in blackface and travesty. And we see another cartoon here by a Philadelphia cartoonist, which is mocking dandyism. We have two white dandies on one side of the cartoon, and we have two black dandies on the other side, certainly much more ludicrous looking than the whites. And one of them is further mocked by having a monkey in the windowsill behind him who's in the exact same posture as this right-hand-most black dandy. And that monkey takes us to science. So science and stage, very much merged in this period. The University of Pennsylvania was the first secular university in the United States, and it had a major medical school that churned out doctors and scientists who were investigating the human body and the human race and human ranking. I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. And over here on the right, we have Charles Willson Peale of Philadelphia, whose museum set the model for museums thereafter, including P.T. Barnum's. These were museums that featured natural history collections and fine art. And Peale, of course, himself and his sons were artists. And this is a beautiful painting. It's at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts by Peale, a self-portrait in his museum. And that museum was located on the top floor of Independence Hall for many, many years. So that's how closely politics, science, and art and culture were linked at this time. He had many, many specimens of interesting, exotic human and non-human species in this collection, as well as artworks. These are some of the scientists who came out of the University of Pennsylvania. They were all doctors. Charles Caldwell, major spokesman for phrenology. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. Fascinating. You explore the bumps on somebody's head and you know all about their moral and intellectual character. This became an entertainment act as well as a scientific field. Samuel Cartwright, who another MD who made a linguistic argument that the snake in the biblical story of Adam and Eve was actually a black man. Samuel George Morton, raised and educated as a Quaker in Philadelphia, who collected skulls from the world over and established definitive rankings of racial hierarchy by measuring them with his very modern tools like the facial goniometer. Penn Museum has a lot of his material and is trying to figure out how to deal with it at this point. It's an embarrassment to them. One of his students and important followers, Josiah Nott, also educated at Penn, took up Morton's banner after Morton died fairly young, and not really set in stone these racial hierarchies, and drew together it was called ethnology of the time to make his argument about racial ranking and to provide it to politicians as they were trying to figure out what to do about, for example, free and slave state status for new territories. So those ideas about the human body came into play as people were looking at bodies dancing on the stages of Philadelphia. And that's the essential argument of my current research that I demonstrate through lots and lots of documentation. Before I close, I just want to offer some caveats that I think are particularly critical for us to bear in mind these days. These are just a few that I could mention. First, attend to the context of the past that you're investigating. Don't apply your knowledge and your current state of awareness to the people back then, because they didn't know what you know. They didn't understand what you understand. They had a different context and a different set of accepted understandings. So you have to respect where they were coming from, what they knew, what they had access to, or else you're going to completely misunderstand why they made the decisions and the choices that they made. You also have to investigate what the nature is of the archive that you have access to. Archives primarily have written, and in some cases, graphic documentation, iconographic documentation. Where did that come from? Largely, it came from men. Largely, it came from men who were in positions of power, relative positions of power. And those who were powerless or who weren't literate are very little documented in these archives. That's very important to bear in mind. What is missing? And how can you get at that, at what's missing? Something else to bear in mind is that dance both disappears and continues. Once the dance is over, it's over. And those of us who have written criticism know how over it is when it's over, when we try to think back and write about it. But dancing continues in its way. New productions are mounted. Teachers pass on technique and choreography to their students. Socially, we continue to pick up movements and behaviors that have been passed on from our ancestors to us that we pass forward. So dance both disappears and continues, and parsing this out and figuring out what has disappeared and what continuities can we trace is a fascinating process. Try also to navigate academic and disciplinary silos. There might be wonderful information about dance that comes from musicologists, that comes from historians, that comes from archaeologists. Who knows where it's going to come from? It's hard sometimes to break through those barriers. Even linguistically, I've just uncovered this mountain of fantastic material by Spanish dance historians that I was unable to get at until I found one source. And then I had the references there, and one reference led to another. But English-speaking historians are not referring to that material unless they make a point of going to it. So it's very, very important to try to break through these silos and barriers. I mean, nobody's doing it on purpose. It's just kind of how it happens. So I just want to conclude with a display of the various images that people, of course, these are drawings, but these are these represent the kinds of dancing and the kinds of theatrical works that people of the day would have been performing and would have been viewing between 1820 and 1860 on Philadelphia stages. And I can tell you that all of these performers were on Philadelphia stages, and the works they represent were danced on Philadelphia stages. So we have a lot of deep history here. Ballet did not start in the 1930s when Lincoln Kirstein brought George Balanchine to New York. Lincoln Kirstein might wish you thought that, but it's not true. So I just bear in mind that some of the given histories that I learned, for example, when I was in college, need to be overturned. So that is my talk for the day and for the evening. I will try to stop sharing my screen. Somehow I can't do that.
Okay, let's see, maybe I can do it.
Because my cursor has disappeared. There it is. Okay.
Okay, great.
So that's what I have to offer at this point, and I certainly hope you have some questions.
That's great. Everyone can unmute as you ask a question, or you can also write a question in chat, or if you have anything to say or ask in particularly. I was wondering, you didn't explain the black balls, but you showed the picture of the caricatures of them, and then they also were, a parallel to the dance assemblies, the sort of white upper class dance assemblies. So I'm wondering if there was any kind of parallel in Black theater, like, the Chitlin circuit that appears later. Was there, was there something that the white audiences, or the white performers, for instance, would see that then,
Yeah, I know what you're asking.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And that history was.
Yeah. In Philadelphia, we have a very, very few glimpses of this, very, very, very few, and of theatrical performance by African Americans in this period. Teeny tiny whispers of it. Much better known, afraid I am going to have to turn to New York here, is the African Grove Theater in New York, in the 1820s, I believe it was, around I think it was like 1820 to 24. A fascinating story, and there have been a number of books written about it. And if anybody's interested, get in touch with me, and I can give you the resources. The founder of the African Grove Theater had been a sailor, and the whole history of sailing and the carriage of cultural material on these ships with sailors, right, is a fascinating story. And again, there are some superb sources on that matter as well. The figure who founded the African Grove Theater, he had been a sailor, and founded this theater in New York. They were hounded and had to move and were closed down and were hassled. Anyway, it eventually fell apart after a few years of heroic effort. And there have been some very, very interesting studies of the African Grove Theater. Again, if you want to, I can pop you the bibliographic material. One of their star performers, James Hewlett, did perform independently in Philadelphia later, after the African Grove had disbanded. He eventually went to England and had a career in Europe. And he was apparently a very fine actor. Okay. So there was very, very little. In terms of social dance, as Terry and a few others know, I did recently publish a paper in the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography on the African Fancy Ball of 1828. And I can send you a PDF of that if you get in touch with me, that talks about the social dance scene among elite Blacks. What there was among the non-elite is a whole other matter, both for Blacks and whites. And that's something that I try to peel back the obscure information about in the course of my current research.
Okay, great.
I think Elizabeth had a question.
And Nancy Heller has her hand up as well, right? So Nancy, you want to go first, and then Elizabeth? You have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So mostly at first I wanted to just say that was fantastic. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Visual imagery, lots of things. Some things I knew, but most things I didn't.
Good.
Interesting. And let me just second your comment about the theater collection in the free library. I've used that a number of times, and it's unbelievable. Just
yeah.
unbelievable. So thank you for sharing so generously your thoughts about places we could look. Since my other area is visual art history, no surprise, I glommed onto some of those things. So these are very minor, but I just was a comment and a question. The comment is just to throw it in there in case people aren't aware that Charles Wilson Peele's sons, of course, as you say, many of them, and there were many
Rembrandt and Titian and
important painters, and so did his daughters. To throw that out there, who were called things like Sophonisba Anguissola Peel, you know, named after, just as the men were named after.
name.
Yeah, right.
And he also trained one of his slaves, an African.
Yeah.
An African American, and there's some research on him as well. He became a paper cutter portraiture.
Oh yeah, wow, interesting. And I'm going to look it up because I don't imagine you know this off the top of your head. But I was very interested in that 1850. I think it's the Friedler family parlor, which was a great.
Oh yeah.
I was wondering who painted it, but it may not be known. I mean, it may not be.
Yeah, I don't. This I don't know off the top of my head.
Not
I'm
fair
sorry. Yeah.
And I guess my last question was, good old Henry Whale. He and maybe other Philadelphia dance masters. I'm just trying to get a better sense of what, for somebody like me who knows, you know, nothing, what would they have been teaching and who would they have been teaching? I mean, is it sort of parallel to the European courts and the dancing masters?
There was no court, right?
Right.
They were teaching the elite and elite aspirants.
And this is social dance stuff.
I mean, this is a time where the issue of class is very critical in the United States because we're supposed to be a Republican Democratic nation that doesn't have class, right?
Right.
And at the same time, there are all of these people who are doggedly following European models, and they want to do all the latest European dances, and they want to wear the European dresses, and they want to have all the proper behavior. Of course, the Europeans don't believe that Americans, so they thought of all of them as savages, and they called Americans savages or, you know, commercial money grubbers. They had all kinds of disparaging terms for Americans, United Statians, whatever you want to call them now. But, you know, I made my money however I made it. Now, and I want to dress nice and I want to dance nice. And I want to travel to England and go to the continent, and I have to know how to behave. Exactly. So there were many lists and lists of these dancing masters. The Philadelphia population supported a lot of them at once. And they held their balls, and they served the Philadelphia the city dancing assembly, which was, you know, super duper elite. And some of them, like Charles Durang, also worked in the theater. And so there's a great deal of porosity between theater and ballroom. And you see many of the ballroom dances are named for theatrical dances, including Ethiopian quadrilles. There are a number of, there are social dances in these books for Lucy Long, who was a famous blackface character. So the history is so interestingly intertwined.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks.
You're welcome. Elizabeth, your question.
Oh, thank you so much for this talk. I very much appreciate this excavation, as well as sort of just the detailing of your process and, you know, sort of historian pointers and all of that. I think Terry sort of addressed how I was trying to get into this question, and I actually am interested in reading the 1828 ball.
Well, if Terry sends me everybody's email, because I don't have everybody's email.
I will absolutely.
I'll be happy to send you the PDF.
Sure.
Great, because I think that might fill in something that I have questions about as a historian. Is how are you trying to grapple with thinking about Black experience as only framed through white spectatorship, right? Like all of the archival material seems to be derived from white viewership, like the Charles Dickens and all of that. And I guess I'm thinking about sight in terms of Washington Square Park, right? Down in Philadelphia is also Congo Square. And the times that I've been there and sort of reflected on the dancing that happened there, that I have no sense of what that looks like or what it felt like. And I'm just, I'm curious about how you're trying to work through some of those issues. Like that you mentioned around absences in the archives.
Yeah. Fortunately, in this period, fortunately, Black newspapers were starting to be published. Great resource for my work, and I have used them heavily. And you'll see when you get the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography article on the Black Ball, you'll see the importance of those newspapers in speaking up from a Black perspective. Of course, that's still a Black elite perspective. These were free, primarily Northern, educated voices. Now they tried, I know, sincerely to represent their brethren throughout the nation, but they were also, as I mentioned, very much affected by the culture of respectability. And most of the discussion of dance and theater, not all, but most, is condemnatory in the Black newspapers. Don't do it. They think we're a bunch of singing, dancing comic clowns. Don't let them be confirmed in that view by your behavior. But not all is that way. Surprisingly, for example, Frederick Douglass's newspaper, he sometimes had reports on the latest ballet premiere at the Paris Opera. Although he also made one of the most potent anti-minstrel statements, anti-blackface minstrel statement of any writer at the time. And some African Americans were publishing their own pamphlets and statements. So that's the best I can do in that regard. There are voices that I am chagrined that I can't recover. I can acknowledge that I can't recover them. One of the very dark glasses that I can look through are the police reports in the major white newspapers, which very frequently carried accounts of dance halls or dance houses, most of which were interracial and were not segregated. In the area that's now Society Hill, that was the big Black, white, working class neighborhood. And there's a plaque there to Francis Johnson, in fact, a very important African-American composer, band leader, musician of the time. These dance halls were busted all the time. And there would be from our point of view, again, stomach churning descriptions of the people and the ways they were moving and what they said and how they were treated. But you get a glimpse that there was a whole other life world going on there through those kinds of documents. Something else, if I had the time and access, would be to go through the discipline books of the Black churches. I did go through the one surviving one from this period at Bethel. And there is a case of a man who was excommunicated because of his lewd behavior at a dance hall. Now, that's not why he was brought up. His wife brought him up for wife beating and drunkenness. And then all, this other stuff came up. I suspect that other of the discipline books, if we could find them, a lot of these resources have disappeared. And this one was at Mother Bethel. That was where I found it. I didn't find this at one of the other archives. We might find out some more that way. But very few of those churches exist in the location they existed before, or were able to salvage their documentation the way Bethel did. And even Bethel it's pretty sparse.
Lisa Krause, do you have a question? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I had my hand up and then I kind of took it down. Elizabeth's question went to mind to some degree. I just, I wonder, like, there have been reconstructions of Baroque dances, and there's so many dance forms that we can see reenacted. And I just don't have, I guess I have to read Dickens and go more to the descriptive material, the kind, which you're talking about. But I have this hankering to just see what we're talking about. Like, how did they literally move? It's easier for me to picture the quote
You mean the
classical.
blackface dancers or the ballet dancers or both?
Well, more the minstrelsy and more of the blackface dancers and the you know, like the balls, if they're descended from sort of social dance, European social dance.
Well, the ball dancing is well known. I mean, many people. I bet Chris here even is doing, you know, in the some of the contra dances that he does. Probably those are directly related.
Yeah, so that's not hard to imagine. It's more like I have no way of having a mental picture of Juba in motion. I just don't.
Well, read the Dickens. It's pretty
Okay.
phenomenal. Many years ago, I remember Dance Magazine having a little tiny sidebar article on somebody who was looking to reconstruct blackface minstrel dances to see what we could learn about them. It disappeared, and when you can't find it online. And when I got in touch with one of the editors at Dance Magazine, who I knew, and I said, "What? You know, it was a few years back. I remember I can picture the image with it. What happened to that? Oh, I don't know anything about that. We don't have any. I don't know what happened to it. That was shut down." One thing that I don't know even know if this stuff is still up there, but a couple years ago, when I YouTube searched blackface minstrelsy, I was shocked how much came up. I mean, this is 20th century film stuff, but there was a lot of blackface in early 20th century film. I mean, you think of Al Jolson, for example.
Right.
A whole blackface act that you can see. And when I looked at it, I mean, my jaw just dropped. What it also made really clear to me was the continuity from Commedia dell'arte of the Harlequin figure that you just see right through these early 20th century, the costume that they dressed the sort of the Jim Crow figure in. It looks like a ragged costume in the T.D. Rice images, but it became the diamond-shaped lozenges of a Harlequin in the film costuming. And there are studies of, you know, Harlequin was a blackface character. He wore a black mask, and he was a servant, and he was a trickster. He had a lot of the characteristics that were ascribed to African American people, particularly enslaved at the time. So I don't know if that stuff is still up there on YouTube. Maybe they pulled it down, but it was fascinating to look at. And a number of the minstrel historians have done some fantastic research on the movement material, and I draw very heavily on them. And if you're interested, Lisa, I can give you a list of those people.
Thank you.
Read the Gene and Marshall Stearns. Some of you probably know their jazz dance book. It's excellent and has terrific movement description going back to this period. That's one that I can recommend.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Anne Marie had a question. She's still here. She said, what was your first step gathering all this information? How did you begin? And then she said, this was so informative. Thank you. But just, you know, like, where's one? Where's one for you? How did you begin?
Well, I think I told you one was my wonderful mentor, Gigi Oswald, saying, go study John Durang. That was one, because I wouldn't have touched Philadelphia if not for her. I would have jumped back over to Spain and done something over, you know, oh, shucks. So that was one. And then John Durang led me to, I had thought I was going to do a second biography of Charles Durang, his son, who's such an interesting figure. And then I thought, I already did a biography. I don't really want to do a biography. I want to talk about romantic ballet. That was 2. And 3 was that moment in the print room at the library company, looking at that material and saying, oh, I think I have to change my focus here. This stuff does matter.
Yeah,
So,
it's amazingly how holistically, you know, you have to approach everything. We all know that every piece of the environment shapes, you know, even in our own dance community now, if the press drops out or the funder drops out or the theaters aren't there. I mean, every piece of it forms the ecology of it. Yeah.
that's right.
It was true. It was true. It's ever been true. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not covering it all. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not covering.
Yeah.
I'm really not covering circuses and acrobatic
Yeah.
dance.
Yeah.
A little bit with the Ravels, I have to, because they were such important ballet presenters. But that's a whole other world. And the circus was very important in the early ballet. I can't deny it. I'm peripherally touching on it, but I just can't uncover that whole world.
Right.
And the circus was also very important to blackface minstrelsy, because a lot of those minstrels were white-face clowns who became blackface clowns.
Yeah.
Very related.
Amazing. Another question from Nancy? No? Oh, you just have your little hand up there. Everyone raise your hand. Last questions, comments? This is a trove of stuff that you've opened up here, and I'll be curious to see how it all ends. Colin, you have a question?
Yeah, just a kind of really specific question. I was really intrigued by the caricature image of the dandies you showed. And I was wondering if that, I guess I was wondering if you talk about or have had read materials on how dandies were viewed in the United States.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Whether that changed also from the kind of 1830s and later in the century, and how that related to the French or British dandy, and I guess I'm wondering that distinction maybe between the black dandy and the white dandy, and how whether the white dandy was also being mocked, and just to a lesser degree, and what explains that discrepancy, and how that relates to
you've already hinted that you've guessed at a lot of it. That racial cartooning, which has been called minstrelsy on the page, and then there was minstrelsy on the stage, and they're very related. Actually, the English were the models. Like Cruikshank was very much a model for E.W. Clay, who did a number of the images that I showed, and others picked up on Clay's life in Philadelphia. It was called Life in Philadelphia, but the racial cartooning started as his series Life in Philadelphia. And then others picked up, other cartoonists were adding to Life in Philadelphia. So Philadelphia was like the home of racial cartooning. And but he was very, very much influenced by Cruikshank and other of the English political cartoonists. So they were definitely related. And the English mocked dandyism all the time. And so that also translated over to United States humor. But what you mock because people aspire to it. It's something that's going to touch them. You're going to burn them if you mock it. So it's clearly was something that really mattered. It was bad enough that whites were attempting to be dandies and upper class and snooty, but that blacks were. I mean, that was like just beyond acceptance, and that's why there's a book that compares by it's Philadelphia Stories. It's right here on my desk by Samuel Otter. He talks about the depiction of dandies in Life in Philadelphia series by Clay, and he talks about the fact that the white ones are definitely mocking, but the black ones, the black cartoons demonstrate a degree of detail that the white cartoons are missing. It's more vicious. And the one that I showed you by the white and the black dandies with the monkey in the background by James I don't know how you say it, if it's Thackeray or Thackeray. I'm not sure how you actually say his name. Also a Philadelphia cartoonist with a monkey in the background. The dandies are often depicted in these ape-like postures or with associations to nature somewhere in the image. They're barely out of the jungle. So in terms of the French satire, well, Boulevard Theater definitely came over with the Ravels, and they're of course French ballet scenarios. Many of them were performed on American stages. So there was certainly a lot of cultural continuity. England was a much more immediate cultural touchstone, but France was important as well because it was important to the English. Anyway, there's something I'll send you, Colin, on dandyism that will, I think, interest you. There's a work.
Thank you.
But I'll send you a bibliographic reference. You're welcome.
Lynn, if I could, Terry, time for one more question, or?
Sure, of course.
Yeah. Thanks, Lynn, for a really great talk. And I really liked your Pennsylvania history piece that you published. It was a wonderful kind of discovery of that period. I know you cautioned, as a general caution to researchers, to be aware of what is missing in collected history. I'm just wondering if in your research you had some pleasurable discovery that filled a gap in what was assumed to be missing, that you found evidence for, or someplace. Did you, I mean, maybe a lot of your research was filled with these discoveries, but I'm just wondering if there was something that was assumed missing in prior research or writing that you were able to uncover and reveal.
Well, I'll tell you something in my John Durang research that was thrilling. I found the marriage record of John Durang's parents from the Alsace. His father had been, Jacob Durang, had been in the French army. And as soon as he was released, he married and left, headed over the ocean to the United States. But he and his wife were married in the Alsace, and I found that marriage record through the Latter-day Saints genealogical service. I don't know if any of you have ever used that, but if you go to the any church of Latter-day Saints, they're very, very generous in helping anybody with any genealogical research. It's a central part of their own religious theology, is tracking ancestors, but they're very, very helpful to anybody. And I told them what I was looking for, and they went to work, and they gave me a call, and these were the days of reel-to-reel kind of microfiche and microfilm, that kind of miserable stuff. But they found it, and they called me, and I went down, and I went through. I was looking for records from a certain period, and I went down, and all of a sudden, oh my God, there's Jacob Durang, marriage to, and I like everybody in the archive was jumping and applauding. That's what happens in archives when you find something exciting. So that was a really, really thrilling moment. That's about the most undiscovered discovery that I can mention. I mean, for me, uncovering this story bit by bit has been a constant source of new findings. I'm doing a lot of research also on Spanish American dance, just because I can't leave Spain alone. It's just too fascinating. And I did a big paper recently that I had to deliver it in Spanish. It was terrifying, but on the cachucha, Fanny Elsler's famous dance. And I did finally find, because I began reading, I found who the Spanish dance historians were. I couldn't even find it through my English language sources. But when I finally broke into that world, I found sources of the cachucha that I wasn't able to find in the English language sources. So that was also very exciting. And that's why I caution about the siloing of our disciplinary and linguistic studies, because they might know stuff all common knowledge over there. It hasn't made it over here yet, believe it or not, despite the internet. Mm-hmm. So keep looking.
Any last questions or comments or anything to ask Lynn? Or
I have a question for Colin. Okay. I hear that Paris is going back into lockdown, including museums and libraries. Are you going to be able to go?
Are you going?
I don't know. They haven't. The foreign ministry hasn't updated their regulations yet, so I don't know. I mean, the borders are still closed to Americans the way they were before, so I'm hoping they'll still honor that exception they had for students, but I don't know yet. So I'm hoping. I'm gonna try to just go to the airport and see what happens.
All right. Okay. Best wishes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Well. Yeah. Bon voyage on that. Good luck. You have a lot of historian and history interested people here, Lynn. So I
Yeah,
think
that's great.
it's
Well,
really
thank
exciting.
you all for listening. It's so much fun for me to
Yeah, no, it's just, you know, it's something I just, now I'm, you know, like we've done our little project and this is a larger project, and it just feels like this is something that needs to be included in presenting, you know, just generally, you know, through the,
Yeah.
through our
Yeah. If
community.
anybody has a
Yeah.
digital humanities connection, I would love
Yeah.
my database to become a digital humanities resource. It would need a lot of work. Right now, it's a real
Yeah. It's a
sloppy
great
work.
idea. Well, let's just continue this conversation, because that's
Why should anybody else have to go through that research,
Yeah.
right? I did it all. Just it should
Yeah.
be there.
That's fantastic. Great idea. Terrific. Okay, now I have to say that we have 2 more informances coming up. The next one is Christopher Williams, also an incredible research addict. He will be presenting his research on the Ballet Russe, and it's calling Falling in the Footsteps of Nijinsky. So that's on November 11th. And then Amalia Kolanova will show 2 of her films and talk about them in early December. Everyone, thank you so much for coming here, attending, being, seeing, and I wish you all well, for sure. And I assume everyone's voted. So I have to say that. Let's hope this week is terrific for all of us and that you continue to have dancing and dance in your lives. So good night and thank you. And thank you, Lynn, so much. Yes, excellent.
Thank you all for your great questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
To be continued.
Bye.
So long.